Why did everyone fall silent when she walked past the mess hall that first morning? Maybe it was her age. Maybe it was the way her steps didn't hurry, didn't try to keep pace with the young lions around her. Or maybe it was the case she carried, long, hardened, fused to her hand like it was a part of her body. She didn't care to guess. Silence was something she knew how to live with. The thin air at 10,000 feet felt like a blade sawing across her lungs as she reached the crest of the gravel path that wound between rows of barriers and prefabricated units. Forward Operating Base Kestrel, a name meant to inspire vigilance and grace. To her, it felt like exile carved into the side of a mountain. 57 years weighed on Major Anna Kavak's frame, and she felt every one of them in that altitude. The younger soldiers, their faces barely touched by lines, their shoulders always squared as if a camera was watching, glanced at her as though she were furniture. A relic, an administrative fossil sent to count bullets and shuffle papers while the real predators stalked the high ridges. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to. She saw it in the way their conversations dipped when she passed. She felt it in the smirks, the sidelong glances at the weapon case in her grip. The quiet verdict was unanimous. She was irrelevant. But relics, she thought, carry histories, and histories are only quiet until the storm calls them back. Her quarters were nothing more than a container on stilts, painted dull beige, its metal skin vibrating in the mountain wind. A corporal with a clipboard had led her there with all the enthusiasm of a bored clerk at a bus station. He hadn't even used her name, just her rank, clipped and perfunctory, before pointing to the prefab unit. Inside, the air smelled of dust and machine oil. The cot was a steel frame with a mattress barely 2 fingers thick. Anna placed her duffels neatly in the corner. She unpacked with the calm precision of someone who had spent too many years living out of transit bags. Fatigues folded tight. A small stack of books, the bindings cracked from long nights. And finally, the rifle case. The latches opened with a metallic click that echoed in the silence, like a church bell in an abandoned town. She lifted the lid. It wasn't sleek carbon fiber or matte black polymer like the rifles the platoon favored. It wasn't new, and it wasn't fashionable. It was a Dragunov, an SVDM-2, heavily modified, worn in places that only years of use could polish smooth. Its stock had been replaced with modern composite, its barrel floated free, its scope a German masterpiece worth more than the corporal's car. An old body with a sharpened sole. Anna's hands moved across it with ritual familiarity. She oiled the bolt carrier, ran a cloth along the barrel, adjusted the scope's mount. Her fingers were steady. Each motion was a silent conversation with the weapon, a prayer in metal and oil. Through the small window, she could see the platoon swagger back from the mess, their laughter bouncing against the steel walls. To them, she was invisible, a ghost among lions. The next morning, invisibility ended. Master Sergeant Thorne filled her doorway, broad-shouldered, sun-cut features shadowing his smirk. 32, his confidence carved into every movement. He was the sniper chief of the platoon, the man these young soldiers watched like an older brother who never failed. His eyes flicked from Anna to the rifle parts laid across her cot, and then the smirk widened. "Major Kavak," he said. The rank rolled off his tongue like an accusation. "I've reviewed your file. Pentagon desk for the last 10 years. Not much call for high-angle ballistics in a basement, I imagine." He tilted his chin at the rifle. "What is that thing? Did you win it in a raffle?" Anna kept her eyes on the bolt in her hand, cloth moving with deliberate calm. "Designated marksman rifle," she said evenly. "Chambered in 7.62 by 54 rimmed, reliable in extreme conditions." Thorne laughed, sharp, dismissive. "We're running high-tempo, high-tech operations here, Major. My teams are carrying rifles that cost more than your pension. They've got integrated ballistic computers, laser rangefinders, scopes that calculate solutions faster than you can blink. We don't have time to babysit someone who isn't field current." The words hit like stones. She didn't flinch. He went on. Your predecessor was a captain who knew his job was to push paper and requisition rounds. I expect the same from you. The supply depot, by the motor pool. Corporal Carter will show you the sheets. Just try not to get rust from that museum piece on the ammo crates. And then he turned and walked away, not waiting for her response, not even looking back. The silence in his wake felt heavier than the altitude. Anna reassembled her rifle with steady hands. The final click of the receiver cover locked in place. It was an old sound, a sound she had heard in jungles, deserts, frozen valleys. She let it echo in the quiet, an answer she didn't need to voice. For a week she lived her exile without complaint. The depot became her world. Shelves of boxes, rows of crates, spreadsheets blinking on an old laptop. Corporal Carter, young and ambitious, followed her lead reluctantly. At first, he treated her like everyone else did, polite but dismissive, certain she was here to count beans. But Carter noticed things. The way she ran her fingers along each seal. The way she opened random crates, checking the brass for tarnish, the powder for humidity damage. The way she spoke in fragments, her voice low but precise. Moisture is the enemy of consistency, she told him once, almost as if to herself. One corroded grain of powder can push you off by feet at 1,000 meters. Her eyes, he realized, were always watching, not just the depot, the mountains, the ridges, the thin lines of heat rising off the rock when the sun reached its peak. He, catch her pausing at the bay door, gaze locked on the valley as if she were reading a text he couldn't see. When the base slept, she hiked alone to a rocky ledge overlooking a ravine. No rangefinder, no weather meter, just her breath fogging in the dawn, her fingers brushing dust into the air, her eyes narrowing against the horizon. One cold bore shot each morning, the truest shot, the one you only get once, a chip of stone splintering off a boulder 1,000 meters away, and the next day another chip, impossibly close to the first. A ritual no one knew, carved into rock as proof of a conversation between her and the mountain. She wasn't counting bullets, she was listening to the land breathe. What none of them realized, what even she hadn't admitted to herself, was that the storm was coming. And when it broke, the mountain would decide whose silence mattered. What if the storm came faster than anyone expected? What if the machines, so proud in their precision, choked on the air of the mountain? No one in the Tactical Operations Center wanted to say it, but everyone felt it. They were losing control. The crisis began with a whisper across a secure channel. A target, not just any man, but a ghost who had haunted the coalition for years. A commander they called the Wolf, Charismatic, Ruthless. His signature was ambushes that left villages in ashes and convoys in ruins. They had hunted him across valleys and deserts, and now, finally, he was cornered inside a fortified compound at the end of a canyon called the Serpent's Tooth. The directive from command was short: neutralize him. All eyes turned to Master Sergeant Thorne. His men trusted him like gravity. If he said the mission was possible, then it was, and he said it with all the confidence of a man who had never missed. The TOC filled with the hum of machines, the glow of maps projected on screens. The air smelled of coffee and dust, the sound of keyboards clattering like insect wings. Officers crowded around the table, voices sharp, controlled, rehearsed. Anna stood in the corner. She wasn't meant to be there except to monitor ammunition records for the inevitable after-action report. That was her role, a clerk, an extra, a body in the shadows. No one expected her to speak. No one wanted her opinion. So she watched. On the main screen, digital overlays mapped the canyon. Wind readings jumped across displays, numbers fluctuating like a heartbeat out of rhythm. The Serpent's Tooth was no ordinary valley. It funneled air like a throat, spinning unpredictable gusts that threw bullets off course by feet. Every sniper knew its reputation. But Thorne's voice cut through the worry. Winds gusting 20 to 30 knots, variable west-northwest, Kestrels are programmed. Solutions are dynamic but manageable. We'll insert from the south ridge. Clean 1,250-meter shot into the courtyard. His words were pure conviction. He believed in the tech, in the machines, in the glossy precision of numbers that scrolled across his handheld device. His men nodded, reassured. Anna's eyes flicked to the instruments. The readings weren't stable. They leapt like frightened birds refusing to settle. Outside, clouds rolled in dark and bruised, moving faster than predicted. She breathed in through her nose, let it sit in her lungs. The storm had teeth, sharper than they realized. Alpha Team prepared with crisp efficiency. Packs checked, scopes calibrated, radios tested. They moved with the quiet swagger of men who trusted both themselves and their machines. Anna said nothing, but she remembered something the mountain had whispered to her at dawn. The way the dust devils spun in the valley below, the way the ridgeline grasses bent in one direction, then the opposite, in intervals no computer could predict. Thorne glanced her way once, not to include her but to remind her of her place. She didn't need the reminder, she simply watched. When Alpha departed, silence fell over the TOC. Only the hiss of the radio remained, carrying voices stretched thin by distance and static. The colonel leaned on the console, jaw tight. Analysts tracked drones overhead, grainy feeds showing the compound, the courtyard, the movement of armed men below. For 90 minutes they waited. Then the sniper's voice crackled across the net. TOC Alpha in position, eyes on the target. The room stilled. But the voice that followed wasn't steady, it was strained. Wind's a vortex, solutions are unstable, readings shift every 5 seconds. The colonel keyed the mic. What's your confidence? Silence, then reluctantly, low, sir. Mirage is boiling, feels like shooting through water. Thorne's reply snapped like a whip. Trust the tech, Alpha. Find a low, take the shot. On the screen, the sniper's scope view appeared grainy but clear enough. A man walked across the courtyard, guards clustered around him. Broad shoulders, confident stride, it was him, the wolf. The sniper whispered, taking the shot. A heartbeat of silence. Everyone in the TOC held their breath. Then nothing. Miss shot went high and right, target spooked, he's moving. The wolf was hustled toward a hardened building. Shouts erupted. Screens flickered with sudden chaos. The window was gone. Thorne slammed his fist against the console, fury in every line of his face. Damn it, how could you miss? The room buzzed with anger, panic, disbelief. But in the far corner, Anna moved. Not rushed, not loud. She simply walked to the communications console, her boots measured, her face calm. The young lieutenant at the console blinked at her. She didn't wait for permission. She keyed the mic. Alpha, this is Major KVAC. What is your position relative to the target? Silence, confusion. Then the spotter's voice, South Ridge, bearing 340. Her eyes scanned the map. She saw it immediately, the way the canyon funneled air, the way cliffs curved into each other. Her voice was steady. You're reading the primary wind, not the rotor effect. It's lifting under you, pulling the round high. Disregard your computer. Thorne spun toward her, fury rising. Major, stand down, you are not cleared. Quiet, the colonel said, holding up a hand. His gaze stayed locked on Anna. What's your correction? She didn't look at him. Her voice flowed directly into the mic. Alpha, this is Kentucky windage. You'll see 3 gusts, then a lull. On that lull, hold 2 mils left, 0.3 mils high. Fire on my mark. The sniper's voice wavered. 2 mils, Major, that's. Trust me. The scope view shifted. The reticle moved far left of the door, absurdly off target. Every man in the TOC thought it was madness, but her eyes never wavered. First gust, she said softly. Second, third, get ready. A heartbeat of silence. Fire. The scope flashed. On the drone feed, dust burst from the wall, 2 feet left, a foot high, exactly where she said it would. And then the wolf stepped from the doorway. For 1 second, just one, he thought the danger had passed. The bullet struck. He collapsed instantly. Silence filled the TOC. Not relief, not celebration, just stunned silence. Then the spotter's voice, breathless. Target down. HVT neutralized. My God, it was perfect. No one moved. No one spoke. They all stared at her, the quiet relic who had just done what no machine, no tech, no algorithm could. She had bent the storm to her will with nothing but instinct and memory. From that moment, the air at Fob Kestrel changed. Conversations hushed when she walked past. Eyes followed her, not with dismissal now, but with questions, with awe. Even Corporal Carter felt it. He caught himself watching her with the curiosity of someone seeing a monument rise where rubble had been. But the man who felt it most was Thorne. His foundation cracked in that moment. His pride had been built on faith in technology, in his role as the apex predator of this mountain, and she had stripped it away with a whisper. That night when the TOC emptied, he pulled her file from the secure system. What he found wasn't a record. It was an absence. Pages blacked out, deployments erased, commendations with citations redacted. It wasn't a desk officer's history. It was a void stamped with the words, top secret /eyes only /project ghost. He stared at the screen long after the others had left, the silence pressing against him like a weight. And in that silence, one question clawed at him, louder than the storm itself. Who was she? What if victory only opened the door to something darker? What if taking down the wolf wasn't an ending, but the beginning of a storm the mountain had been waiting to release? 2 days after the impossible shot, Alpha Team was out again. They were scouting a ridge, planning overwatch positions for patrol routes. It should have been routine, but the mountains don't forgive arrogance. The first crack of a rifle round came like lightning without thunder. No warning, no muzzle flash, just the hiss of air splitting apart and the sickening snap as the team's radio operator collapsed, his legs shattered. Chaos erupted, shouts across the net, boots scrambling for cover on an exposed slope of shale that offered no safety. They were pinned. The shooter wasn't just skilled, he was deliberate, patient. Each shot forced Alpha tighter against the rock, each movement punished by near misses that showered them with stone fragments. The TOC went live with panic. Drones were launched, sensors engaged, algorithms spinning to triangulate the invisible hand that held Alpha in place. But every time a drone dipped low, a round snapped past it, forcing retreat. The shooter wasn't blind. He was hunting them and mocking the machines as he did. Colonel Davies' voice cut through the noise, hard, controlled. Where is he? Find him. We can't send a QRF until that sniper's suppressed. But Thorne's voice, once granite, now trembled with edges. Thermals show nothing. Acoustic triangulation's useless in this canyon. He's moving between shots. He's invisible. The name slipped into the room like a shadow. Jin. An enemy sniper whispered about in reports, a ghost credited with more than 30 coalition kills. They had said he was patient, methodical, merciless. A wolf in his own right, unleashed now with one mission: revenge. The room felt smaller with that name in it. Screens blurred with static, as if the machines themselves didn't want to face him. Alpha's voices crackled over the net. We can't move. Every time we shift, he's on us. We've got 30 minutes of daylight left. After that, we're blind. Thorne's jaw clenched. His men's lives were slipping from his hands, and all the tech in the world couldn't stop it. For the first time, he felt what Anna had seen all along. The mountain didn't care about machines. The mountain answered only to those who could read it. And so, with pride broken, with nothing left to hold, he turned. Anna stood at the map table, silent, her eyes distant as if she were already on the ridge with Alpha. When Thorne walked to her, the room went still. Everyone watched. He had never needed anyone before, never admitted weakness, but his voice came quiet, stripped of its arrogance. We can't find him. My men are trapped. 30 minutes of light left. After that, they're finished. Major, can you help us?" He wasn't asking an officer. He was asking something older, deeper, asking a ghost for mercy. Anna didn't look at him. Her eyes remained on the topographical map glowing across the table. She traced the contour lines with her finger, her mind piecing together ridges, shadows, echoes. Then she closed her eyes, listening not to the numbers but to the sound of Jin's rifle. Each crack carried a rhythm. First the snap of the bullet. Then, a heartbeat later, the echo rolling down the canyon. But there was something else. The way the secondary echo arrived slightly higher, bouncing off rock that wasn't in Alpha's line of sight. She opened her eyes. "Give me the live feed from Drone 3, she said. "High orbit." The image filled the main screen. To everyone else, it was just a jumble of rock and shadow. 1,000 hiding places, all meaningless. But Anna leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. She pointed. There, that fissure between the boulders. 10-degree firing arc on Alpha's slope. Deep shadow from the afternoon sun. He's dug in. Thorne's head snapped toward her. "With respect, Major, that's just a shadow. Thermal shows nothing. How can you possibly—" "Because he's patient," she interrupted, her voice steady, almost gentle. "He's using a water-cooled suppressor. Heavy. He can't move far between shots, just shift within the hide. That's why you can't track him. And listen." She gestured to the audio feed. "Hear the crack, then the echo. The second wave comes from higher up, bouncing off the face above that fissure. His hide is deep, like a cave. He isn't leaving." The room leaned closer, straining to hear what she described. Most couldn't even tell the difference. But her finger pointed again, steady as stone. "And look there. Every time he fires, watch that puff of dust. Not from the muzzle, it's the concussion displacing ground 5 feet in front of the fissure. He's fortified. A spider hole. He's not going anywhere." The details were forensic, impossible. She was reconstructing a scene no one else could see, weaving sound, shadow, dust into certainty. Thorne stared at the screen, then back at her. His voice, when it came, wasn't angry. It was reverent. "Major, I've been doing this 15 years. I've never seen anyone read terrain like that. No one. Who trained you?" The question hung heavy in the silence. Even the hum of the machine seemed to wait for her answer. Anna's eyes lingered on the fissure one last time. Then she looked at him, not with pride but with memory, with weight. "I wasn't trained by anyone you've heard of," she said softly. "I wrote the doctrine they studied. I was the lead instructor for the first experimental interdiction program, Project Ghost." Her voice dropped lower, almost tender. "My call sign was Spectre, and before I ever wore this uniform I was taught by a man who said wind and shadow never lie, a veteran of another war. His name was Vasily." The name struck Thorne like a round to the chest. Vasily. Generic to some, but to a sniper, thunderous. And Spectre, more than a name, it was a myth whispered to rookies, a boogeyman of impossible shots, a ghost no one believed was real. And she was standing in front of him. Before Thorne could speak, the counter-sniper team moved on her coordinates. Minutes later, their voice cut through the radio. "Target neutralized. Hide was fortified exactly where you said. We'd never have found it in 1,000 years." The TOC was silent again. Every operator, every analyst, every officer turned to her. The woman they had dismissed as a relic had seen a ghost through shadows and echoes. Anna didn't celebrate. She simply turned toward the exit. The room parted for her, bodies shifting aside as if some unspoken law demanded it. Soldiers straightened as she passed, their eyes wide, their silence reverent. At the door, Thorne stopped her. He didn't speak. He just stood at attention, back straight, hand rising in a salute that was slow, solemn, and absolute. It wasn't protocol. It was acknowledgement. One predator saluting the master who had written the hunt. And for the first time since arriving at Kestrel, Anna Kavak allowed herself to breathe. But she knew something the others didn't. Ghosts don't vanish just because you silence one. Ghosts linger. They watch. They wait for the moment to remind you that the past is never gone, it only sleeps. And somewhere beyond those ridges, the storm wasn't finished. Why did they look at her differently now? What had changed? She hadn't grown younger. She hadn't become louder or sharper or stronger in the way the young lions measured strength. The only difference was truth, and truth had a way of rearranging everything. The day after Jin was silenced, silence of a different kind followed Anna everywhere. Not the silence of dismissal, the silence of reverence. The same soldiers who once smirked when she passed now straightened unconsciously, nodding, lowering their voices. The title Major no longer sounded like a formality. It was weight. Carter, the young corporal who had shadowed her in the depot, felt it most. He carried crates for her without being asked now. He walked beside her, not behind, his eyes restless, full of questions he didn't know how to ask. He studied the way she scanned the ridgelines, the way her eyes lingered on dust swirling in the wind as if reading some invisible scripture. But Anna didn't speak. She rarely did, and when she did, it wasn't to explain herself. Her words were never about her, only about what mattered. Thorne, on the other hand, struggled. He wore his respect like an ill-fitting uniform. He couldn't look at her without remembering the sound of her calm voice calling impossible corrections, the way she had pointed at nothing more than a shadow and pulled a ghost out of it. His pride had fractured. He wasn't broken. He was too stubborn for that. But the man who had believed technology made him untouchable now found himself standing in the ruins of certainty. At night, he replayed the moment he asked her the question, "Who trained you?" And her answer, soft and devastating, "Spectre, a myth made flesh." It haunted him. It humbled him. The base whispered it too. The young snipers huddled in corners of the mess hall, murmuring stories they'd half heard in training. Legends of impossible shots in forgotten valleys. Tales of a ghost who could read wind like scripture and shadow like a map. They'd never believed them until now. And she was here, walking quietly among them, drinking coffee alone, her hands folded like any other soldier who'd seen too much. But reverence was a double-edged blade. Some men carried awe, others carried fear, and a few carried resentment. For every soldier who saluted her in silence, another muttered under his breath, bitter that his pride had been wounded by a ghost from another war. Anna ignored it all. She had long ago stopped measuring herself by the eyes of others, but she did feel something stir inside her when she saw Carter watching, waiting, trying to learn without asking. He reminded her of another time, another soldier, herself at 19, standing in front of Vasily, the man who had taught her to trust wind and shadow over machines. And that memory was dangerous, because memories carry ghosts and ghosts carry grief. One morning before dawn, Anna stood again on her rocky ledge overlooking the ravine. The mountain breathed cold across her face. In her palm, she held the spent casing from the counter-sniper's shot, polished smooth by her thumb. It wasn't victory she felt holding it. It was balance. The equation had been violent, but it had been resolved. Behind her came the sound of boots on gravel. She turned. Carter stood there holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. His face was uncertain, respectful, almost shy. "Major," he said softly, offering 1 mug. "Black, I figured." Anna's lips curved barely, almost invisible. She accepted it. "Thank you." He stayed beside her, sipping his own, the two of them facing the pale horizon. He wanted to ask about Spectre, about the ghost she carried, about the doctrine she had written in shadows. He wanted to know how she had done it, how she had become the legend. But he didn't. He was wiser than his years suggested. He understood that silence was her answer, that what mattered wasn't the telling but the watching, the listening, the learning. And so they stood, side by side, the young soldier and the old ghost, sharing coffee in the cold light of dawn. Later that week, Thorne approached her, not with arrogance, not even with confidence, but with something rawer. He found her in the depot, counting crates with Carter. For a long time he said nothing, watching her hands move with steady precision. Then he cleared his throat. "Major." She looked up, eyes calm, waiting. "I need to understand," he said, his voice low. "That shot, that call, the way you read Jin's hide, I've never seen anything like it. None of us have. We live and die by our gear, our tech, our data. And you," he broke off, shaking his head, "you made it look like instinct, like magic." Anna set the clipboard down. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but certain. "It isn't magic, it's listening. Machines read numbers, people read signs. You watch the way light bends across stone, the way a hawk rides a thermal, the way dust lifts then drops. The mountain tells you the truth, but most have forgotten how to hear it." Thorne swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't, not anymore. Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "You're a good sniper, Master Sergeant, but you lean on tools that don't love you back. Learn the land, feel it, trust what doesn't lie." Her words cut deeper than any reprimand. They weren't criticism. They were an invitation to humility. For Thorne, it was harder to accept than failure. But he nodded. For the first time since her arrival, he nodded without resentment. "Teach me," he said simply. Anna didn't smile. She only picked up the clipboard again, resumed her count, but something in the silence between them shifted. Over the following days, Carter noticed small changes. Thorne spent more time outside the TOC, less time buried in his gadgets. He stood beside Anna during her quiet vigils at the loading bay, trying to see what she saw. The younger snipers, too, began drifting toward her shadow, hungry for whatever scraps of wisdom she might leave behind. She never lectured, never gathered them in circles to tell war stories. That wasn't her way. Instead, she lived her lessons. A nod at the sky before a storm, a comment about the temperature dropping 2 degrees, a fingertip brushing a crack in the dust, reading its meaning. They watched, they absorbed, they learned even if they didn't understand yet. But legends don't walk among men without consequence. The more the truth of Spectre spread, the more the enemy listened too. Stories leak, whispers travel, and for every soldier who felt safer under her gaze, there was an enemy across the ridges who heard the same whispers and burned with vengeance. The wolf was gone, Jin was gone, but shadows breed shadows, and Anna knew this storm wasn't over. The mountain still held secrets, waiting for the moment to reveal them. As she stood one evening, watching the sun bleed red across the ridges, Carter asked the question that had been burning in him since the first day he'd seen her clean the old rifle. His voice was hesitant, almost a whisper. "Major, do you ever feel like you don't belong here, with us, with this war?" She didn't answer at first. She let the wind move across her face, let the silence weigh between them. Then finally she spoke. "Belonging isn't the point," she said. "The point is whether you carry what the moment needs. That's all." Her voice was calm, but deep in her chest she felt the ache of truth. She didn't belong. Not to them, not to this place, not even to herself. She belonged to the ghosts of wars no one remembered, to the shadows of men long dead, to doctrines written in silence and buried in secrecy. And the heaviest truth of all was this: ghosts don't retire, they wait. What happens when you silence one ghost, only to awaken another? Did anyone at Kestrel really believe it would end with Jin? Or the wolf? Wars don't stop for single deaths. They bleed into the next moment and the next, until someone decides the bleeding has gone too far. The mountains were quiet for a week, too quiet. Patrols returned with fewer encounters. Drones reported diminished movement in the valleys. The silence was deceptive, and Anna knew it. She felt it in her bones when she woke before dawn, her body tuned to rhythms younger soldiers didn't hear. It wasn't peace. It was pause. One evening, Carter found her standing alone outside the depot, eyes fixed on the ridgeline. "You're waiting for something," he said, not as a question but as a realization. Anna's gaze didn't shift. "The storm," she murmured. It broke 3 days later. A convoy, 4 vehicles, returning from a resupply mission. The lead truck hit a pressure plate mine just as it rounded a blind curve. The explosion tore metal and flesh alike, flipping the vehicle sideways. Small arms fire erupted from the ridges, disciplined, coordinated. The ambush wasn't reckless rage. It was surgical, controlled. Someone had learned from Jin's failure, adapted his precision into broader tactics. By the time QRF reached them, 3 soldiers were dead, 5 wounded. The survivors swore the ambushers melted back into the mountain before gunships could arrive. Ghosts fighting ghosts. The TOC pulsed with urgency that night. Analysts scoured drone footage, trying to predict the insurgency's next step. Thorne paced, jaw set, every muscle rigid. Carter sat stiff at the comms, his face pale. Anna stood at the back, silent. Her silence was no longer invisible. Men looked at her often, waiting, hoping she would break it with something they could hold onto. But she didn't. Not yet. The colonel slammed a hand against the map table. They're adjusting. They've studied us. That ambush was textbook. Someone's directing them. We cut off the head, but the body is still moving. Thorne finally stopped packing. They're baiting us. That convoy wasn't just about supplies. They're probing, testing where we'll break. His eyes flicked to Anna just for a second as if waiting for confirmation. She gave none. But inside, her thoughts ran like cold rivers. Whoever had taken command of the insurgents wasn't just vengeful. They were disciplined, patient. They understood the rhythm of fear. That meant more traps, more ghosts, and more blood. 2 nights later, the fear became flesh. Alpha Team again. They had returned to the ridges, determined to regain initiative. The mission was reconnaissance, nothing more. But at 2200 hours the radio erupted. Static, shouts, gunfire, then silence. Every man in the TOC froze. "Alpha, report," the colonel demanded. "Nothing." Thorne's face drained of color. Carter stared at the console, willing the silence to break. Then a voice came, ragged, broken by static. "Alpha contact, heavy fire, ambush multiple positions. We're—" The transmission cut off. The TOC detonated with movement. Overlays lit up. Drones scrambled. Analysts shouted coordinates. But the canyon they were in was narrow, steep, and blind. By the time the feed stabilized, all they showed were muzzle flashes flickering in and out of rock shadows. Thorne slammed a fist against the table. "They've got them boxed in. If we send QRF blind, they'll be slaughtered." The colonel's jaw locked. Options. The room went quiet, too quiet. The silence was an answer in itself. And then all eyes turned toward her. Anna hadn't moved. She stood with arms folded, eyes locked on the flickering feeds. For a long time she said nothing. The only sound was the hiss of static from Alpha's dying comms. Finally her voice came, low, steady. "They've been studying us. Every patrol route, every overwatch. They knew Alpha would return there. This isn't random, it's planned. Which means," she pointed to a section of the canyon on the map, her finger tracing the contour lines, "their commander is close. He's watching, directing." Thorne shook his head. "We've swept that area a dozen times. Drones, thermals, nothing." Anna's eyes didn't waver. "Then you swept wrong." Her calm unsettled them more than shouting could have. She didn't argue. She didn't justify. She simply knew. The colonel exhaled, frustration sharp. "What do you suggest, Major?" She looked at the map again, then at Thorne. Her words were deliberate. "Send me." The room went silent, absolute. Thorne blinked. "You." Her gaze didn't move. "You need eyes that can see what machines can't. Someone who knows how to hunt ghosts. Your men are dying in that canyon. I can find who's pulling the strings." Thorne's instinct was to protest, to throw up rank and regulation, to say no. But he didn't, because deep down he knew she was right. He had seen her pull the wolf out of the wind, seen her strip Jin from shadows. If anyone could find the new ghost leading this insurgency, it was her. The colonel hesitated. Command rules screamed against the idea of sending a 57-year-old logistics officer into the teeth of an ambush. But then he looked at her. Really looked. Not at her age, not at her file, but at the calm that never wavered, at the silence that had bent storms. Finally he nodded. "Take who you need, get it done." Thorne's jaw flexed, pride fighting with fear, but he said nothing. Carter spoke before he could stop himself. "I'll go with her." Anna turned her head. Their eyes met. His were young, too young for the ghosts waiting in that canyon. But there was no arrogance there now, no swagger, only determination. She gave a single nod, not permission, not gratitude, just acknowledgement. The room exhaled, as if a decision had been written in stone. Minutes later, as she prepped her rifle on the edge of the motor pool, Carter appeared at her side, his pack already slung. Thorne approached, face carved with conflict. "You shouldn't be out there," he said gruffly, "but if you are, bring them back." Anna slid around into the chamber with the reverence of a priest lighting a candle. She didn't look at him. "I'll bring balance," she said. The words weren't bravado, they weren't even promise. They were truth, spoken like wind across stone. And then she moved into the night, Carter at her side, the old Dragunov cradled in her arms like an extension of her soul. As the gate clanged shut behind them, silence followed once more. But this silence wasn't dismissal. It wasn't reverence. It was prayer. What did silence sound like when you knew death was hiding inside it? Was it the rustle of loose stone under boots? The echo of wind moving through narrow rock? Or was it the rhythm of your own breath, reminding you that for now, at least, you were still alive? The canyon answered none of these questions. It only waited. Anna moved first, her steps deliberate, her body low. Carter followed close, his breathing louder than he wanted it to be. He tried to match her calm, her stillness, but he felt like a child carrying too much weight. His rifle seemed heavier in the dark. His heart hammered like it wanted to warn the enemy before his mouth could. Anna, by contrast, was silence. Her body bent with the wind instead of against it. Each step chose the ground, not the other way around. At 57, she was slower than she had once been, but slowness was its own weapon. Where Carter stumbled, she glided. The Dragunov rested in her hands, not carried, not forced, as if it had grown there. From the ridgeline above, sporadic fire cracked down toward Alpha's trapped position. Muzzle flashes bloomed like fireflies in the dark, but never in the same place twice. Whoever was commanding the ambush wasn't careless. They were disciplined, patient. They understood that fear was a more lethal weapon than bullets. Carter whispered, "How do we even begin to find him?" Anna didn't look at him. Her eyes traced the ridges, the fractures in stone, the way echoes carried unnaturally long. "You don't find him," she said quietly. "You let him reveal himself." Her words made no sense to Carter, not yet, but he trusted them anyway. They paused behind a jagged outcrop. From here, Anna could see faint glows where insurgents shifted, reloading, whispering. She studied their movement, their arcs of fire. They weren't scattered. They were placed, guided. "See how they shoot," she whispered to Carter. "Not chaos, not panic. He's directing them, which means he's close." Carter swallowed hard, scanning shadows that all looked the same. But where? Anna closed her eyes for a moment, listening. The canyon breathed differently now. Shots cracked, echoes bounced, dust lifted in faint puffs where rounds struck shale. She tracked the rhythm the way a musician listens for the beat behind the melody. When she opened her eyes, her gaze was sharp. "North face," she murmured. "High fissure, narrow arc. He's dug in, just like Jin, but smarter. He's not pulling the trigger, he's orchestrating." Carter followed her gaze but saw nothing, just darkness and shadow. He almost asked how she knew, but then he remembered the wolf, remembered Jin, remembered the way she had pulled ghosts out of silence before. So he stayed quiet. They moved again, closer, slipping from rock to rock. Every few meters Anna stopped, watching the wind stir dust, counting the seconds between gusts. Carter realized she wasn't just advancing, she was listening, studying, building a map no screen could show. At one point he stumbled on loose stone, the clatter echoing like thunder. He froze, breath trapped. Muzzle flashes sparked from above, rounds cracking close enough to kick shards of rock into his cheek. His pulse spiked. Anna's hand pressed against his shoulder, steady, grounding him. "Breathe," she whispered. "The mountain doesn't forgive panic." It wasn't comfort, it was truth. They waited in stillness until the gunfire shifted again toward Alpha's pinned team. Then Anna moved, guiding Carter into deeper shadow. Minutes stretched like hours. Each heartbeat carried the weight of discovery. Each sound, each echo could have been the last thing they heard. Finally, they reached a shallow ledge beneath the north face. From here, Anna crouched, eyes narrowing as she studied the fissures above. She saw it, the faintest discoloration where rock dust had been disturbed, the almost imperceptible dark line of a firing slit camouflaged into shadow. "There," she whispered, "he's in there, watching." Carter strained his eyes, saw nothing. His frustration tightened his chest, but he trusted her. He had to. "Now what?" he asked. Anna rested the Dragunov against the rock, her cheek against the worn stock. She didn't aim to fire, not yet. She was studying, measuring the angle, the depth, the way the fissure bent into shadow. "Now we wait," she said. "He's patient, we'll be more patient." The minutes bled into each other. Carter's muscles ached, his nerves frayed. He wanted to shift, to breathe deeper, to do something. But Anna was still, stone still, her eye never leaving the fissure. And then it happened. A faint glint. Not a muzzle flash, not a movement, just a brief reflection, the kind that only came when glass caught moonlight. A scope, hidden deep inside. Anna exhaled slowly. "There you are." Her finger brushed the trigger guard, but she didn't fire. Not yet. She needed more. A single shot meant nothing if it wasn't final. Instead, she whispered to Carter, "Mark the dust when he fires. Watch where it lifts. That's his breath. That's his rhythm." Carter nodded, swallowing. His eyes locked on the fissure even though he still couldn't see what she did. The crack came seconds later. A round split the air above Alpha's trapped team. Carter's eyes widened, he saw it, just barely. A faint puff of dust dislodged beneath the fissure, too subtle for machines but clear to someone watching with human eyes. "There," he whispered harshly, "I saw it." Anna's lips curved faintly, not a smile but acknowledgement. "Good, now you're listening." She adjusted her hold, breathing steady. But before she could line the shot, new movement caught her eye, insurgents shifting along the canyon rim, tightening their net around Alpha. Time was bleeding out. If she waited too long, Alpha would be crushed. If she fired too soon, she might only wound the ghost directing the trap. Her voice was calm, but Carter could hear the weight behind it. Every choice has a cost. Precision isn't about hitting the target. It's about choosing which cost you can live with. Carter's throat tightened. "So what cost can you live with?" She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she pressed her cheek tighter to the Dragunov, eyes locked on the fissure. Her breath slowed, each exhale a metronome. The canyon blurred, the echoes faded. There was only the fissure, the dust, the faint glint of glass, and the truth waiting in silence. And as her finger settled against the trigger, she thought of Vasily, of his quiet voice teaching her in another lifetime. Wind and shadow never lie. Listen, and you'll hear everything. Her heart didn't race, it slowed. And in that silence, she prepared to speak the mountain's language once more. What if the world narrowed down to one breath? One finger resting on a trigger, one chance to choose not just life and death, but the meaning behind them. The canyon was alive with echoes. Muzzle flashes blinked like angry stars, their light bouncing off stone. Alpha's voices crackled over the net, strained, desperate, fatting with each second. Above them, insurgents tightened their arc. Time was running out. Anna lay still, cheek pressed to the Dragunov's worn stock, eyes fixed on the fissure. The faint line of disturbed dust. The the sliver of glass that betrayed a scope hidden deep in shadow, the ghost in the mountain watching. Her breathing slowed. In, out, in, out. Carter knelt beside her, his chest heaving, his pulse too loud in his own ears. He couldn't see what she saw, but he trusted it. He trusted her. "Major," he whispered, voice breaking, "if you miss." Anna's reply was quiet, steady. "I won't." It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't bravado, it was fact, spoken like stone. She didn't wait for a perfect lull in the wind. Perfection didn't exist in a canyon like this. She waited for rhythm, for the mountain's breath, for the heartbeat between gusts. Her finger tightened. The rifle bucked, its sound swallowed by the canyon's roar. The Dragunov's round carved invisible air, bent by currents, lifted by heat, driven by patience. A scream erupted from the fissure. Not long, not drawn out, sharp, startled, cut short. Dust burst from the slit as if the mountain itself had exhaled. Carter's eyes widened. "You hit him." Anna was already cycling the bolt, chambering another round. She didn't celebrate, she didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed fixed on the fissure. "Wait," she whispered. Seconds stretched. Insurgents fired wildly from the ridges, their pattern breaking. Discipline cracked without its unseen hand guiding them. Alpha's pinned team surged, returning fire with desperate precision. Then movement. A figure dragged itself into view, half-shadowed, pulling against stone. Even from this distance, Carter could see the dark smear of blood trailing. Anna's scope never wavered. She exhaled, fired again. The figure collapsed, still. For a moment the canyon froze. Insurgents hesitated, their cohesion shattered. Then panic rippled through them. Without direction, without the ghost commanding, they were just men with rifles in a storm. And storms break men. Alpha seized the chance, rallying under Thorne's barked orders. Grenades arced. Fire surged. Within minutes the ambush unraveled, insurgents retreating into cracks and shadows they could no longer hold. The radio erupted with Alpha's voices. Relief. Shouts. Some laughter, raw and jagged, the kind that comes only when death has brushed close but passed by. Carter slumped against the rock, exhaling a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands shook. His throat burned with adrenaline. He turned to Anna, ready to cheer, to celebrate, to call her what she was, savior. But she wasn't celebrating. She wasn't even moving. She sat with the Dragunov across her lap, her eyes still on the fissure where the enemy had fallen. Carter frowned. "Major, it's over, we." Her voice cut him off, low, heavy. "It's never over." He didn't understand, not then. They pulled back as Alpha regrouped. Medics worked on the wounded. Drones circled, confirming the insurgents had broken. But Anna's silence hung over it all like a shroud. When they returned to Fob Kestrel, the base erupted with noise. Cheers. Slaps on backs. The story spread faster than the wind. Major Kavak, the relic, had walked into the canyon and pulled victory from shadows again. Carter was caught in it, too. He heard the whispers, the reverence. He saw the way young soldiers watched Anna like she was a living monument, and part of him felt pride standing beside her. But Anna herself walked through the noise untouched. She moved with the same calm she always had, her eyes scanning ridgelines, her hands cleaning the Dragunov in quiet ritual. She neither rejected nor embraced their reverence. She simply carried it, as she carried everything else. That night Carter found her outside, sitting on a crate near the depot, the rifle across her knees. The moon cast her face in silver, deepening the lines, making her look like part of the mountain itself. He sat beside her, silent at first. Then finally he spoke. "You saved them, you saved all of us. Why don't you feel it?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Because I also ended someone who believed as strongly as we do. Someone's ghost now walks because of me. That's not victory, it's balance. And balance is never joy." Carter swallowed. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say the man deserved it, that they had been right, that she had been right. but the weight in her voice smothered the words. Anna turned her head, studying him. You think carrying a rifle is about killing. It is. It's about deciding who gets to see another sunrise, and that decision never leaves you, not at dawn, not ever. Her words sank into him like stones dropped into deep water. For the first time, Carter realized what he was really seeing when he looked at her. Not strength, not legend, but cost. Every line on her face wasn't age, it was weight. The kind no machine could calculate, the kind no metal could erase. And in that moment, he finally understood what it meant to live like a ghost. The base slept uneasy that night, even in victory. Because some part of everyone knew what Anna knew. Killing one commander, silencing one ghost, didn't end wars. It only shifted the shadows. And in those shadows, something else was already moving. Why did the morning feel heavier after survival? Why, when the base was alive with relief, did Anna's chest feel full not with triumph but with silence? The sun rose slow across the eastern peaks, painting the ridges in pale gold. Fob kestrel stirred, boots crunching gravel, distant hum of generators, soldiers laughing too loudly, voices stretched thin by the tension they had survived. Victory had a taste, and it was bittersweet like metal on the tongue. Anna sat on the ledge she had claimed in her first week, the same place she had practiced cold-bore shots when no one was watching. The Dragunov lay across her knees, cleaned, oiled, ready, though she hadn't touched the trigger since the canyon. In her palm, she turned a brass casing over and over, its surface warm from the sun. She didn't keep trophies. This one wasn't a trophy. It was memory, weight made visible. Carter found her there. He always did now. He sat beside her, silent for a long moment before speaking. I don't think I'll ever forget that canyon, the way it felt, the sound of the shot, the silence after. Anna's eyes stayed on the horizon. Good, don't forget. Forgetting is what makes us careless. It's what makes ghosts come back. He nodded, but his jaw was tight, his eyes restless. Finally, he asked the question that had burned in him since that night. Do you regret it? All of it? The program, the doctrine, the specter? Her thumb brushed the casing. She let the silence hang until it became its own answer. Then softly she said, regret isn't the word. Regret belongs to choices you can undo. What I carry can't be undone. Carter swallowed, the truth heavy. Anna turned her gaze to him at last. But understand this, Corporal. You don't measure a life by victories or failures. You measure it by whether you carried the weight honestly, and whether, when the silence demanded it, you stood steady. Her words weren't instruction. They were inheritance. Later that morning in the mess hall, the air shifted when she walked in. Soldiers lowered their voices, some out of respect, others out of awe. Carter trailed beside her, not as her assistant anymore, but as her shadow. A few nodded to him as well now, not because of who he was, but because of who walked beside him. Thorne sat at a table near the back, his men around him. He didn't speak when Anna entered, but when she passed, he rose quietly, his chair scraping against the floor. He came to attention, hand rising in a sharp, deliberate salute. This time it wasn't in panic or awe or desperation. It was choice. Anna met his eyes. For a heartbeat, she saw not arrogance, not pride, but humility, a man remade by the storm. She returned the salute with a nod, subtle, almost invisible. That was enough. The days that followed moved differently. Patrols ran with sharper eyes. Snipers practiced not just with devices, but with the land, watching dust, wind, light. Anna's presence changed them, even if she never lectured. Her silence was the lesson. Carter began to mirror her without realizing it. He lingered at ridges, watching the sway of grass. He paused before shots, waiting for rhythm instead of numbers. He stopped asking endless questions. He started listening. One evening he stood beside her on the ledge, Dragunov in her hands, his own rifle across his chest. The wind stirred dust at their feet. "Teach me," he said simply. Anna didn't smile, she didn't nod, she only passed him a handful of dust. "Then start here, feel what the mountain says." The boy closed his eyes. The dust swirled between his fingers. He didn't understand it yet, but he would. And Anna knew then that the silence she carried didn't have to die with her. It could be passed forward, quietly, without ceremony. Still, ghosts remained. They always did. Reports whispered that the insurgency hadn't broken, only bent. Another figure would rise. Another canyon would bleed. She knew it. Thorne knew it. Carter, too, was beginning to understand. But for now, balance held. On her final evening before rotation orders would carry her down the mountain, Anna stood alone by the wire, watching the sun set in flames across jagged peaks. She thought of Vasily, of the doctrine she had written, of the shots she had taken, the lives she had ended, the soldiers she had saved. She thought of the weight, the silence, the ghosts that never left. And she thought of Carter, young, uncertain, willing to listen. He wasn't ready yet, but he would be. The mountain breathed cold against her skin. She breathed with it. She didn't need medals. She didn't need stories. She didn't need her name written in any history book. She had given what the silence demanded. And sometimes that was enough. As she turned to walk back into the base, Carter appeared, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one, his hand steady this time, not trembling. "Black," he said, "like always." Anna's lips curved faintly. She accepted it. Their fingers brushed. They stood side by side, watching the last light fade. 2 soldiers, one carrying ghosts, the other learning to. No words were needed. Silence carried more. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.